Thank you very much for joining us. Just in case there were any lingering doubts, Lens hammered the point home on Saturday night. We have a title race on our hands here in France. 24 hours after PSG's slip in Rennes, Les Soigneurs travelled to the capital with a chance to regain the initiative, and they did that emphatically, winning 5-0 at the Stade Jean-Bouin. Lens have won 11 of their last 12 league matches. Now they've picked up 52 points from 22 games, one more than PSG, the league title winners for the last 4 seasons. They're doing this with an annual budget of around 60 million euros, about 800 million less than PSG's budget. So how are Les Soigneurs competing? Who are the key figures behind this unexpected title charge? And crucially, can they keep it going? These are the questions we will look to answer in this week's Le Dossier. And joining me to answer those questions, I'm delighted to welcome writer and broadcaster Tom Williams. How are you, Tom?
Hello, Matt. Yes, very well, thank you. Hope all's well with you. I know you're having some home improvements done at the moment. Very exciting.
I have asked my handyman just to keep the noise down a little bit, so hopefully that won't affect you. But yeah, it's exciting. You know, these are the things that happen when you're middle aged, and you know, the things you get excited about, getting a new kitchen. But anyway, Andy Scott is with us. Andy, how are things with you?
Are you middle aged, Matt? Do you count as middle aged? So you may be beyond middle aged now.
So you know, I'm wearing a sort of grey hoodie. I've got a football shirt over it with the hood out. It's a Lens shirt, just, you know, to go with the theme today. But that's quite a young, sort of cool look. No, I mean, I think you're being quite harsh.
The fact that you are referring to it as a young, pretty cool look, you might have got away with it right up until those words left your mouth. I'm not sure there's any way back now, Matt.
Andy Scott, you commentated this weekend. You had a couple of games, including the new league leaders, Lens 5, Paris FC 0. Obviously a very strong away performance. Paris FC perhaps were there for the taking. I think they were quite weak. But Andy, tell us about this Lens side. Why are they so strong and doing so well?
Well, they're obviously overperforming. I think that goes without saying. But that is, first of all, down to the coach, who is clearly a brilliant manager. Not just a brilliant, you know, I think the manager in every sense. You know, when we talk about a manager in Britain, we think about the coach and the guy who sort of runs everything behind the scenes. I think Pierre Sage, obviously, his man management skills are tremendous. Clearly, the players are playing for him and overperforming, giving absolutely everything because they love this guy who did a very good job at Olympique Lyonnais for about 14 months before being unceremoniously dismissed midway through last season. He's bounced back brilliantly at Lens. Clearly, the coaching is exceptional. Everybody in that team knows exactly what they've got to do. The system works superbly well. And I think that if you just, I'm just going to pick out a couple of the players in that team. I mean, first of all, it's very much a new team. They brought in a number of new signings last summer, and they have strengthened the squad in the January window with some very interesting signings. But if you look at, you know, some examples, Robin Risser, young goalkeeper, completely unproven in Ligue 1. He's been brilliant for them this season. Adrien Thomasson, the captain of that team, somebody who you would never previously have thought of as a big star in a team pushing for the Ligue 1 title, a guy who played for some pretty modest teams in the French game. Suddenly the captain, all-action midfielder, the guy who runs at least 2 kilometres more than any other player on the park. Florian Thauvin, obviously somebody we know about because he was in the France squad when they won the World Cup in 2018. Great player for Marseille. He's come back. He's rejuvenated on joining Lens on his return to French football, having been in Italy and in Mexico before that. Wesley Said, a guy who was injury-prone, who never did much. Suddenly you've got him scoring 10 goals, already his best ever season in Ligue 1, you know, full of confidence. These are just a few examples. This team is performing way beyond what is expected of it. The question is, can they keep it going? But right now, we're about 2/3 of the way through the season. They're top of the league, and it's looking pretty good for them.
Andy, you've mentioned a few players, and the thing is, you know, you could mention all of them because they've been so successful, and the recruitment in particular has been outstanding. We've talked about Mathieu Udol, the left-back, quite a lot over the last few weeks. He's been brilliant, and a lot of us are thinking he should be in the France squad. Mamadou Sangare, the Malian midfielder who's come in from Austrian football, has been absolutely tremendous as well in the middle of the park. So I think it's important, Tom, to look sort of above that as well and look at the fact that Joseph Aurgulian, the president, put in a new structure in the summer. Pierre Sage coming in as coach. Jean-Louis Leca took charge in May, so he's got to take a lot of credit for the signings. He's the new sporting director. And also Benjamin Parot, who is the new general manager, who's quite an interesting profile. I met him when he was the press officer at Reims. He then became press officer at Lens, and he's kind of worked his way up. And I think Aurgulian has seen somebody who is very bright and very competent, and Parot's doing a fantastic job. So they seem to be putting all the building blocks in place.
Yeah, completely. There's just a real sense of harmony of everyone working hand in hand, a real clear sense of direction. And it's reminiscent of, what Lens did very successfully back in 2022-23 when Francaise was the coach. That sense of people pulling in the same direction and, recruiting the right players for the right roles. But as Andy says, I really think Pierre Sage's coaching is central to everything. And I think the most telling demonstration of that is the fact that it almost doesn't matter which players are missing. Lens seem to play as well in every single game. And, we saw that again in the game on Saturday. Okay, they're away at Paris FC, not one of the league's leading lights, but they're missing Samson Baidoo again. They're missing Ruben Aguiar, who's suspended. Jonathan Gahadi is still sidelined. Kylian Antonio, young centre-back who's come in and done well in recent weeks, he wasn't available either. And yet it still works. And I thought what happened after the defeat at Marseille a few weeks back was really interesting, because they went into that game at the Velodrome with key players missing, Samson Baidoo in particular, who is the colossus at the heart of the defence, and another great example of fantastic scouting and recruitment that Jean-Louis Leca is overseeing. He was unavailable through injury, and as a consequence, Sage basically shook up his entire back line. He moved Mathieu Udol from left wing back into the back three. He switched Ruben Aguiar from right wing back over to left wing back. And I think he thought, we need senior players in the most important roles, because to replace these absent players with younger players will be unfair. You're going to the Velodrome, it's sort of the ultimate test of a young player's mettle, and they might struggle with that. And straight after the game, he very quickly took responsibility for what had happened. He said, I got that wrong. My team selection was wrong. I won't make the same mistake again. And I think the mistake he'd made was underestimating how good his coaching is. And what we've seen in the week since is that in Baidoo's continued absence, he has stuck to the plan. He hasn't brought Udol back into the back three. He hasn't been moving people around to try and get senior players in key positions. He knows that the players in that squad know their roles so well that you can put in, a young kid like Kylian Antonio, like Ismaila Ganiu, like this Bosnian lad who I've not even heard of, Nidal Celik, who started against Paris FC on Saturday. Andrija Buratovic, this young Montenegrin midfielder, again another scouting success story, comes into midfield and performs brilliantly. And a new player arrives, Anas Maximin. Okay, he's not starting yet, but he slots in, and I think it's just because you have this very clear sense of direction. You have, as you say, Matt, a very clear structure, very clear what everyone is doing, and crucially on the pitch, everyone understands their role. And that goes from the most experienced players in the squad, and there are plenty of those, to the very youngest players.
Yeah, and on the few occasions that they've lost, Pierre Sage, like you just said it, in Marseille, took responsibility for that. I was listening to a really interesting interview with him last week as well, and he said, he was asked, how did Lens lose to Metz? Because that was the other thing. They lost to Metz, who were bottom of the table. He said, well, actually, that was partly my fault, because I was impatient and I was used to us winning all our games, winning them well. And at half time, we weren't functioning, and I made a double change. And I shouldn't have done that. I should have thought, okay, we're not having a great day, but let's stick to the plan and it will come. So he's learning as he goes. And I think for the players, it must be fantastic as well when they have an off day for the coach to say, okay, that wasn't only your fault. And obviously, they're right behind him, Andy.
Yeah, but I think that's what's really incredible about this is that, I mean, you mentioned the fact that the whole management structure was changed last summer. Obviously, the results, the success has kind of been instant, which is pretty remarkable. But also just the fact that Lens pushed PSG to the last day or the penultimate weekend of the season in 2023 with a completely different structure in place. This is not a continuation of that at all. It's a completely different. I mean, there are one or two players who were around then. I mean, Jonathan Grady, but he suffered a terrible leg break in training. That's kind of about it.
Wesley Said, who, like
Wesley
you said,
Said,
was a bit part player.
Yeah, and obviously the coach is different. The sporting director was Florent Ghisolfi, I think, in that time, who's of course gone on to have a very interesting career since then. Above him, the sort of managing director was different back then, so completely different. And they kind of fell away after that season. They had a tougher season after that when they were in the Champions League, and they couldn't quite get to the same levels again. And we kind of thought, okay, Francais's time is up. Naturally, they need to kind of move on from that. He was ready to go, and Lens are kind of regressing to the mean. This is a big club in France. They always sell out. It's remarkable. I mean, it's probably worth just emphasising this again to people who are not maybe that familiar with it, that Lens is a small town, so small that you can fit the entire population of the town of Lens into the Stade Bollard, which is always sold out, 38,000 people. Now that is not quite telling the whole story, because there's lots of small towns that kind of make up the area. There's lots of people come from all over to follow the team. They're popular in the whole region. So they have a big support, but not historically a massively successful club. They've never won the French Cup, and they've won the league title once. So they were kind of regressing to the mean in the last season under Francaise, and then last season when Will Still came in, it was kind of a season of transition. They had a different sporting director who I think made a lot of mistakes in terms of recruitment, and they had to correct that last summer, as well as bringing in a new manager. But I don't think anybody could have seen them doing as well as this, and that's the thing. It's Pierre Sage is a sensational coach. I think it just can't be stressed enough what an incredible job this guy's doing.
Yeah, and that home kind of like record, I think they've won their last 10 matches at the Stade Félix Bollard, and it is a cauldron, and they've got this very, very strong identity. And for me, one of the strongest kind of like images, or one of the strongest things to kind of experience on an emotional level, is when they sing that anthem, which is up there with You'll Never Walk Alone, I think. And it's a kind of like reference to their coal mining past, Les Corons, which translates as the houses, the housing they used to have built, these sort of red brick houses in Lens for the coal miners. And actually, one thing I learned this week is that they've rebuilt the sort of like reception area when you go into the club. I think go into the actual stadium or training ground. I'll have to find that out. But they've decked it out as a coal mine. So it's like you're walking into a coal mine, and by all accounts, Jean-Louis Leca, who's from Corsica, is not at all from the north of France, but he's really bought into this, and that's been one of the big selling points, how they convinced the likes of Florian Thauvin to come here, saying, come and play for these people, come and sort of buy into this whole identity.
So I work with Wabi Kazri, former Ligue 1 player for numerous clubs. Worked with him at Canal Plus, and we were chatting about Lens recently when I was in Paris. And he said that whenever he was playing at Stade Bollard, he would deliberately go out early for the second half just so he could listen to the fans singing Les Corons, because he thought it was such a fantastic moment. So that shows you even the players themselves, even opposition players, appreciate, how special that Lens support is. And I guess, seeing it from our British perspective, it's a stadium that is very routinely described as a British style stadium, and it is, with the 4 separate stands, and it's a very similar kind of fandom. You're not a million miles away from the south coast of England in Lens, and I think that's that kind of devotion, the sort of connections to the local mining community, the song, standing there with the scarves held aloft, it feels very familiar from a British perspective, and that's one of the charming things about Lens as well.
It is one of the charming things about Lens. I would say about Les Corons, which is, it does kind of make the hair stand on end on your arm when they sing that. I find it's a bit short. I always feel like it doesn't go on for long enough, and I find it quite curious as well that they do it before the start of the second half rather than before the start of the game. Anyway, that's what they do. But I think it's also, I mean, Tom says there that Lens is not a million miles away from the south coast of England, and obviously that's true. But at the same time, the south coast of England is affluent. It's, you think of places like Brighton, Bournemouth. That is a world away from the north of England, which is really what Lens is more like. This kind of old industrial heartland built around the coal mines, which, of course, are no longer, I mean, the slag heaps are still part of the landscape, but the town is no longer working for the coal mines. It's an industry which is no longer in existence there. But I think, it's a very working class community. And in terms of putting that up against Paris Saint-Germain, you said at the start there, Matt, the obviously the difference in budget, which is colossal. But it's not just that. I mean, Paris Saint-Germain are the club from the capital, the chic capital city. They play in the very posh 16th arrondissement of Paris, while Lens is very working class. I mean, if you look at the voting figures in the last presidential election, probably all recent elections, the far right get a lot of votes in Lens. It's a very, very different social
way to
makeup.
ruin the feel-good story, Andy.
No, but I think it's. I mean, listen, I'm not casting opinion on the far right. I'm just saying that the far right get a lot of votes there, and you can make of that what you will. I could cast my opinion on the far right perhaps in another time if you like, but focus on the football.
Please do.
And I think I think it's just a very interesting way to look at it. Just an incredibly different place compared to the capital. And as you say, the football team is so in touch with the local community. I think it's brilliant what they do for the community, and I think it really is a feel-good story on that basis.
Let's get back to that football team. The only right winger I want to talk about in Lens is Florian Thauvin, who is part of this brilliant front line with Odsonne Edouard and Wesley Saïd. I remember I wrote an article earlier in the season just about this front three that you would have looked at the start and God, that's not going to work. Like, three misfits really. Maybe that's a bit harsh on Thauvin, but Edouard had a very quiet sort of last few seasons in England. But they're doing the job. They're sharing the goals around. The big moment is going to be early in April, the weekend of the 11th or 12th, when Lens play host to PSG. And if they are still in touch, the atmosphere is going to be incredible. It's going to be a wonderful game. Tom, do you think they will still be in touch? I'm going to very quickly give you the fixtures. Lens have got, I think, a slightly tougher run than PSG. They've got Monaco at home, Strasbourg away, Metz at home, Lorient away, Angers at home, Lille away in the big derby. PSG have got 4 home games in their next 6. Those home games are against Metz, Monaco, Nantes and Toulouse. They travel to Le Havre and to Nice. What do you reckon?
I really hope that Lens is still at least within touching distance of PSG, because it would set that game up perfectly. I agree. I think Lens' fixtures between now and then are trickier. Those 3 away games in particular, Strasbourg, an informed Lorient team, Lille in the derby, very tricky. I suspect PSG might be on top by then, but ideally Lens won't be too far away. And then, in an example of the way that football so frequently throws up these little nods to fate, the fact that Lens' last fixture is away to Lyon in a repeat of the final fixture from the 2001-02 season, when Lyon had to beat Lens to win the first of their 7 consecutive titles, and of course did so. If Lens were able to win the title away at Lyon 24 years later, it would be incredible. So the next few weeks leading up to that PSG fixture will be a huge test, because people are starting to look at Lens in a different way. And I think you will see teams setting out more deliberately to try and shut them down in the way that they do when they come up against the more established heavyweights in Ligue 1. But yeah, fingers crossed that this does turn into a proper title race, and that Lens PSG game has something riding on it.
I think probably the thing is, you say they have tougher fixtures. I mean, in a sense, all their fixtures are tougher, because PSG should probably win every game. If they really wanted to, they might win every game. But obviously, one thing that Lens do have in their favour is that they're not involved in European competition, and not only are PSG playing in Europe, but I think, let's be honest, what really matters to PSG this season, probably arguably even more than last season in a way, is the Champions League, because they want to win it again. They want to at least get to the final again, and I think they really feel now that they've won. I think they do feel this. They've won the Ligue 1 title so many times in recent years. They can probably get away with not winning it this once, but they really want to keep going in Europe. They don't want to be eliminated now by Monaco. So I think that could be a factor that maybe plays in Lens' hands a little bit. And obviously, Lens play Monaco this weekend, and that's perfect timing because Monaco are going to be in between the two legs of their tie against PSG in the Champions League playoffs. So, that is something which should massively favour Lens.
Intriguingly, Pierre Sage was asked if Lens are capable of beating PSG at the Stade Félix Bollard, and he said, yes, we're capable of beating PSG if it's not the real PSG, which is an interesting answer. Basically, yeah, if PSG at their best, of course they win. But as we're going to discuss in the second part, it isn't always the real PSG this season. The halftime whistle, meanwhile, is about to blow here